Friends, it's good to have Don back with us. He's been ruminating lately on, is it fair to say, recapturing the biblical ground for a progressive?
You're exactly correct.
Okay.
You're exactly correct.
All right, so we'll be able to, if not conquer the world, at least conquer the American mind by the end of the hour.
All right.
So,
Well, thanks.
We'll take that.
So I think for some, you said earlier on, this is a scary topic. It's a scary topic because it's got exactly what Phil has said. Over the last few decades, the so-called Christian right and the Republican Party have convinced tens of millions of people that Christians care about only three things: eliminating abortion, restricting gay rights, and putting the Ten Commandments in schools. But most of our young people disagree with that. And as a consequence of that, it would not be a surprise to you to know that our young people are not only leaving the churches, they're abandoning politics because none of these issues affect their lives. But most Americans, most American young people, most American progressive Christians do agree on issues that find explicit support in the Bible. And so today I want to talk about those issues on which young people agree, the Bible agrees, without the need for any interpretation. Robin Myers is a minister in the United Church of Christ, and he said in a book called Why the Christian Right is Wrong, as difficult it is for modern Democrats to talk about faith, the truth is that their own party's history of fighting for those who are left out and protecting those who are powerless is in fact one long, tortured, inspired act of faith.
You can't see his notes.
can you see, Don?
I cannot see my
You can.
Other than that,
Other than that,
So, Harold Meyerson is the editor-at-large of the American Prospect, looking back at the centuries of social progress led by American Christians. He writes, "Cracking Republicans' red state lock will be anything but easy, but joining red state voters and endeavoring to enlist their churches in a common struggle or two or more would be a good way to begin. Liberals have certainly done it before." But what are those issues on which Christians and all voters could find common cause today? In my opinion, there are 5 issues: income inequality, the environment, immigration, healthcare, and the use of military power. Let's start by looking at this chart. Of those Americans eligible to vote in 4 years, the total number of millennials and members of Generation Z will exceed the number of earlier generations by about 15 million, only in 4 years. As we saw in recent elections in New York and elsewhere, young people can make a difference, and the issues are ones they care about. As a result of that, I'll be paying particular attention to the views of young people on the issues I address. It is no surprise to anyone here that income gains since 1980 have greatly favored those at the top of the income scale. By 2023, the income gain of those in the top 95% was much higher than those of both median earners and those in the bottom 20%. All that change has occurred since 1980. Before that, income growth at all levels was about the same.
would you say that was a consequence of Reaganomics?
It is. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
As a result, income inequality in the United States, measured by the so-called Gini coefficient, has also reached levels not seen since the 1920s. Again, notice a change beginning in 1980. As a result, income inequality in the United States is now worse than India, on a par with China and Argentina. Note the distributions in Western Europe, Canada, and Australia. As we saw earlier, both the growth in income among high-wage earners and the increase in inequality began after 1980 and 1981. Ronald Reagan became president, began reducing the highest marginal tax rate from almost 70% to less than 30%. In January of 2020, the Pew Research Center surveyed Americans on their views about income inequality in the United States. 61% said there's too much income inequality. Might be expected. More Democrats than Republicans thought there was too much inequality. But even 41% of all Republicans and those who lean Republican thought there's too much income inequality. That is not an insignificant percentage. From March the 14th to 25th, 2025, just a year ago, the Institute of Politics at Harvard Kennedy School surveyed 2,096 young Americans between 18 and 29 years old. As you can see, 42% thought they were struggling or getting by with limited security. Among young people not in college and with no degree, 50% were either struggling or getting by with limited security. As a result, American young people growing income inequality, with income gains only at the top, is a major issue. It keeps them from paying their school loans and buying a house. In 2012, the Public Religion Research Institute, in conjunction with the Berkeley School for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, conducted a large-scale survey of college-age millennials, then ages 18 to 24. As you can see, almost 70% of those surveyed believe the government should do more to reduce the gap between the rich and poor. The survey also asked about specific proposals to reduce that gap. As you can see, 72% of respondents, 72% of young people, favored increasing the tax rate on taxpayers earning more than $1 billion a year. Of course, in the meantime, we've actually gone the other direction, reducing the tax rate on people earning more than $1 million a year. 10 years later, December 2022, AAMC Center for Health Justice conducted a similar national poll of 1,510 members of Generation Z, then between 18 and 24, 10 years ago by. As you can see, 73% of all respondents, including 53% who identify as conservative, believe the federal government should try to reduce the gap between the richest and poorest Americans. The Hebrew Scriptures, which Christians call the Old Testament, are clear about the need for those with means to help the poor. Leviticus 25, 35 to 36 states, if one of your countrymen becomes poor and is unable to support himself among you, help him as you would an alien or temporary resident, so he can continue living among you. Do not take interest of any kind from him, but fear your God so that your countrymen may continue to live among you. The Hebrew Scriptures mandated a formal method of redistribution of wealth with the goal that, quote, there should be no poor among you. The well-to-do were commanded to loan to those in need whatever he needs. And the well-to-do, every seventh year, those loans were to be forgiven, even if they had just recently been incurred. The imperative of reducing the gap between the rich and poor is perhaps the most important message of Jesus, beginning before his birth. Before his birth. Contemplating the birth of Jesus, his mother Mary is quoted as saying in what has become known as Mary's Song, he has brought down ruler from their thrones, he has lifted up the humble, he has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. When the rich man, often described as a ruler, asked Jesus what he could do to return eternal life, he famously replied, quote, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give them to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. After the disciples questioned this advice, he said, quote, but many who are first will be last, and many who will last will be first. Jesus' parable of the rich man and Lazarus illustrates this idea. In this story, the rich man, quote, lived in luxury every day. Lazarus was a beggar who lived at the rich man's gate, quote, longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. When Lazarus the beggar died, the angels carried him to Abraham's side. On his death, the rich man was sent to Hades, the Greek realm of the dead, quote, where he was in torment and in agony in this fire. There is no more graphic illustration in the entire Bible about the need for the rich to aid the poor. Following the commands of Jesus and those of the Jewish scriptures, the earliest Christians practiced what would now be condemned by some as socialism. Quote, all the believers were together and had everything in common, selling their possessions and goods they gave to anyone as he had need. As a result, quote, there was no needy persons among them. It is not an overstatement to say that reducing income inequality should be an imperative for anyone claiming to follow Jesus, and that issue would be very important to our young people. Protecting Earth's environment for future generations is another biblical imperative that would have the support of young people. In 2023, The Lancet conducted an online survey of young adults between 16 and 25 about their views on the environment. In this chart, based on that survey, the two bars on the right represent people who are very concerned about the impact of climate change on them and the planet. As you can see, in every state, at least half of all young people are very worried that climate change is having an impact on the planet and its people. If you add those who are only moderately worried, the percentage is overwhelming. That same study asked respondents for their views on how the government was responding to their concerns about climate change. As you can see, more than 80% said the United States government is failing young Americans, 80%, and betraying them in future generations. A 2025 study asked young people about their views on climate change and the effect on them. 70% reported being somewhat or very worried. A Pew Research study asked whether people favored phasing out the use of fossil fuels entirely. As you can see, 48% of young people were in favor of eliminating fossil fuels, more than twice the percent of those over 65. In his book, Why the Christian Right is Wrong, Robin Meyer writes, quote, there may be no single issue of our time, that more fully reveals one's true religious sentiment or lack thereof than one's approach to the environment. One of the key teachings of the Hebrew Scriptures is that the land belongs to God, and those in it are mere tenants, required to preserve it for future generations. For example, according to Psalms, quote, the earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. According to Genesis, God put Adam in the Garden of Eden, quote, to work it and take care of it. According to Leviticus, the land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine. You are but aliens and my tenants. Throughout the country that you hold as a possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land. To preserve the land for future generations, the Israelites were commanded not to till their fields or prune their vineyards every 7 years. The Israelites did not always follow those commands. In warning the Jewish people about what he thought, told them correctly, would soon lead to the destruction by the Babylonians, prophet Jeremiah wrote, quote, God brought you into a fertile land, ate its fruit and rich produce, but you came and defiled my land, and made my inheritance detestable. The Christian New Testament is not as explicit as the Hebrew Scriptures about the need to preserve the environment, but Revelation says the judgment of the dead will include, quote, destroying those who destroy the earth. Let's look now at the issue of immigration, particularly at the question of whether everyone in the country illegally should be deported, the policy of the current administration. In August of 2024, the Pew Research Center conducted a survey about American views on this subject. As you can see, 64% of all Americans believe there should be a way for undocumented immigrants to stay in the country if certain conditions are met. 77% of Americans between 18 and 29 share this view. Respondents who support allowing undocumented immigrants to stay in the United States were then asked what conditions would be required for them to stay. Only 2 conditions were identified as requirements by at least half of those respondents: passing a background check and having a job. Last year, Gallup conducted its annual survey of American attitudes toward immigration. As you can see, the percentage of Americans who believe immigration is a good thing increased to a record 79%, up from just 64% a year earlier. The aggressive enforcement activities of the Trump administration have made Americans as a whole more supportive of immigration. That fact is confirmed by an October 2025 Pew Research Center study about the attitudes about the Trump administration's efforts to deport undocumented immigrants. More than half said the Trump administration was doing too much to deport immigrants living in the United States illegally. But the same number said that only some of those living in the United States should be deported, compared with only 30% who believe they should all be deported. On perhaps no other issue were the biblical teachings so aligned with the views of young Americans on the issue of immigration. Among the strongest statements on this matter is found in Leviticus. Quote, "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born." As we noted earlier, Deuteronomy establishes for the Israelites an income redistribution system, requiring the rich to make loans to the poor and then forgive them. One aspect of that income redistribution system was expressly granted to aliens. Quote, "When you're harvesting in your field and you overlook a sheep, do not go back to it to get it. Leave it for the alien, the fatherless, so the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat the olives from your trees, do not go over the branches a second time. Leave what remains for the alien, the fatherless, and the widow." The Christian New Testament confirms the continued importance of treating aliens with respect. Hebrews includes this advice, quote, "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers. For by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it." In his famous parable about the Son of Man separating the sheep from the goats, Jesus made hospitality to strangers one of the things in which people would be judged. Those who showed hospitality would be granted eternal life, but those who did not would earn eternal punishment. After the 2024 election, Tufts University surveyed young people between 18 and 34 to determine what 3 issues mattered most to them. As you can see, concern about health care was the 4th most important issue, identified by 26% of those surveyed. Only 11% identified voting rights and democracy among their top 3 issues. In December 2022, the AMAC Center for Health Justice conducted a national poll of 1,510 members of Generation Z, then between 18 and 24, with the purpose of learning more about their attitudes about some of the social issues that influence health and health equity. 87% of all respondents, including 77% of those who identified themselves as conservative, said access to health care is a basic human right. I'm going to repeat that. Including 77% those who identify themselves as conservative. In his book, Why the Christian Right is Wrong, Robin Myers writes, quote, "One of our most common folk aphorisms is this: if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. If that's true, then what are we to make of a repeatedly Christian nation that refuses to make health care a right instead of an economic privilege? Is there a biblical basis for seeing health care as a basic human right? Let's take a look. Ezekiel was a Jewish priest who was exiled to Babylon after the Babylonians had conquered Jerusalem. He wrote a book, now bears his name, trying to explain to the Jewish people why God had let this happen to them. His explanation used the metaphor of the shepherds and their sheep. The shepherds, the people that ruled Israel before the Babylonian conquest. Here's what he wrote. Quote, "Woe to you shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourself with the wool, slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured." In other words, according to Ezekiel, God allowed the conquest of Judah and the destruction of Jerusalem because its leaders had not taken care of the sick and injured. For Christians, the life and teachings of Jesus should be important to question whether health care is a right and not a privilege. Quote, "Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in the synagogues, proclaiming the good news to the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people." There is no evidence that Jesus healed only those who had the money to pay him. Matthew 25, Jesus said that the people entitled to eternal life will be those who looked after the sick. Jesus' parable about the Good Samaritan, the person injured on the Jericho road, did not pay for his care. Instead, the Samaritan not only treated his wounds for free, but paid for his later care. After Jesus' death, the disciples continued to have the power to heal, been granted to them before Jesus died. They then used this power to heal people who had no ability to pay. This map shows how the states rank with respect to health of their citizens, based on data created by the United Health Foundation. Look at the least healthy states, clustered in the Midwest and the South. The least healthy states are dominated by Republicans, who can be expected to vote against any effort to increase access to health care. Most healthy states are dominated by Democrats, who can be expected to vote in favor of efforts to increase access to health care. Here's another presentation of that same data. All the 10 most healthy states, except Utah, voted for Kamala Harris in 2024. On the other hand, all the 10 least healthy states, except New Mexico, voted for Donald Trump. Robin Myers, who talked before, the United Church of Christ minister, writes, quote, "Now in order to save the country from a host of imaginary evils, the poorest Americans vote against their economic self-interest and seem more feverishly committed to the Republican agenda than society's winners are. Nowhere is this more true than it is with respect to health care. In my opinion, people vote against their self-interest because the Democrats have not focused on what's important to them and shown how that's consistent with Christian teachings. Instead, and this is an opinion, Democrats have concentrated on such matters as abortion and gay rights, views that Republicans have argued with some success, perhaps great success, are against biblical teachings. Let's finally look at the use of military force to obtain national objectives, which obviously seems to be at the heart of the Trump administration's agenda. In March 2023, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs published the results of a survey about American attitudes toward global engagement. The data, quote, showed that the youngest two generations of Americans, millennials and Generation Z, are most likely to question global U.S. global engagement as a policy level, and especially hesitant to endorse a foreign policy dominated by military approaches. As you can see in this chart, based on that data, millennials and members of Generation Z were more likely than those in early generations to be interested in international cooperation, and less likely than those earlier generations to be concerned about the physical defense of the country. These different views were reflected in the survey's respondents about the level of defense spending. Twice as many millennials and members of Generation Z want to reduce defense spending, as do those of older generations of Americans. On the other hand, about half as many millennials and members of Generation Z want to increase defense spending. The views of younger Americans on this issue are exactly the opposite of the agenda of the Trump administration. As Robin Myers colorfully writes, quote, the Christian right seemed to accept that war is inevitable if regrettable, and sex is regrettable if inevitable. Those were not the priorities of Jesus, of course, but when's the last time anybody asked what would Jesus do and regard it as anything other than a rhetorical exercise? So, can the case be made that the reluctance of millennials and members of Generation Z to use military force to achieve national objectives is supported by biblical teachings? Robin Myers certainly believes so. He tells a chapter in which this statement is made, quote, Christians don't start wars, they try to stop them. As everyone here knows, it is easy to find express teachings of Jesus that favor peacemaking over war. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, quote, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. But in the same sermon, he said, quote, you've heard they've said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the left also, the other also. If someone wants to sue you and take your mule, your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. In his letter to the Romans, Paul wrote, quote, repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it's possible, as much depends on you, live peaceably with all men. As for this mandate, Paul quoted from Proverbs, quote, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, you heap coals of fire on his head. To this proverb adds, quote, and the Lord will reward you. As Jim Wallace, the founder of Sojourner, writes, quote, this much is clear. Jesus calls us to be peacemakers, not just peace lovers. It is often said the progressives talk about more than what they're against, than what they're for. I've outlined 5 issues that Christian progressives can be for, all of which are biblically based and should appeal to young people, and also those of us who are not so young. You may have other issues. You may disagree with some or all the ones I've identified. So I look forward to your thoughts. So we can stop the screen share.
Don, can you put those 5 back up, please?
I think so. Just screen
If we
share
had a
again.
young person, we could, right? They can get us back.
There we go.
Okay, thanks.
Some of you came in here and said you're afraid of this talk, right?
Would that be you?
Still afraid? Phil?
No, I think it's spot on.
Yes.
I've been following this Tallarico guy from Texas and ran across a video of him speaking at a black church. And I was just smiling the whole time because he was quoting questions he'd been asked about by reporters. And then he was answering them, like, what do you think about Trump's policy on such and such? But he turned it around and he said, well, here's, from a Christian, I'm a Christian, here's from a Christian point of view what the Bible says about that. A lot of the things that you quoted here. And I'm real curious to see, what kind of trajectory he's going to have with, I guess, people who are maybe in flux right now from moving, they still feel like they need to support Trump, but ideologically, to me, it seems like he's really thrown out the hook for the folks who identify.
You know who Tallarico is? Everybody know who Tallarico is? Christian minister running for Senate in Texas.
Yes.
I heard about him more than a year ago because he was speaking against Christian nationalism. I hope you see when you heard about this biblically based political agenda, somebody thought, oh my God, this is going to be awful. It's going to be what the right wing's talking about, right? Progressive Christians have ignored being Christians. They've ignored the fact that they can take these issues and say, look, Jesus said not a single thing about abortion. He said not a single thing about homosexuality. He talked about the environment. He talked about the poor. He talked about peace. That's what Christians should be talking about. What do we do with these other issues important to Democrats? I think we say maybe another day. Let's win the important ones. Comments? What? Your hand is about halfway up, so I guess I can call you back.
I was thinking that sometimes Christians, especially the evangelical, which I grew up in, kind of take more of a Pauline view, misinterpreting sometimes what Paul says, but more of a Pauline ethics than Jesus ethics. I don't want to oppose them, but
No, there's a statement that says Protestantism was the victory of Paul over Peter.
Yeah.
Fundamentalism, the victory of Paul over Jesus.
Ooh, that's
That's a good quote. It's not mine. Other thoughts? Phil, you have a thought?
Are the young people going to be politically engaged enough in the upcoming election to make this a reality? What are we seeing in the polls about their anticipated participation?
Well, it turns out that leads to another talk, and that is that I'm part of it, actually a founding part of Recenter Indiana Inc. We did a survey. Young people would be in support of these issues if they thought they could vote. Some of them think, I don't know how to do it. My parents didn't teach me how to vote. I don't know how to do it. So we now have some money to put out some videos to teach young people the most basics of voting. Where's your polling place? How do you get, what's a voting machine look like? We hope that will help because we know if they show up, they will make a huge difference as they did in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. The question is getting them to show up. So if you have young people in your family, tell them the importance of this. Yes?
There's an organization called vote.org, and that's easy to remember. And that is being addressed to or focused on young people, and it gives them direction on how to check their status if they've already registered to make sure that they haven't been taken off the polls. So I would suggest that everybody with young people have contact vote.org.
Well, there are any number of things you can do. And that is if you know young people, you can say, look, you're registered. By the way, we did a survey, Recenter Indiana did a survey, and the survey was limited to young people who had registered but not voted. They often register when they got their driver's license, but they didn't vote. And they said they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know where to go. So one thing you can do if you have young people in your family or neighbors say, I'm going to vote today, you want to come with me? You're registered, come with me. Just come with me. We're talking about, Recenter's talking about sort of having some kind of an event at the polling places, maybe with a food truck across the street, which is everybody show up between 1 and 2 and 3, vote, take your I voted, go over here and get a free something from the food truck. Those are all things we're talking about. Young people will make a difference if they vote, if they show up.
Tell
Yes.
us what you know about the SAVE Act, which again is one of these efforts to label something that it isn't. Like
Well, the SAVE Act
right
says you
to
have to prove your citizenship. There's been, I think, some misinformation about that. You don't have to have a passport, but you have to have a driver's license that shows that your citizenship has been demonstrated. But it's clearly the intent to stop young people from voting who don't have passports, who don't have driver's licenses. I think it's not going to pass. It's going to get 60 votes in the Senate to pass. So. Other questions? A couple minutes.
So you're not worried about it?
Well, I'm obviously worried about it, but I think it's not going to pass.
What if it does?
Well, we're going to have to make sure that people understand that they have to have something that proves their citizenship. Most of you have driver's licenses that probably, in order to get on an airplane now, you have to have a driver's license that involves proving your citizenship. Most of you will have it. Young people may not have it. Poor people will not have it. I don't think it's going to pass, but I'm not a prophet, unfortunately.
Don, we've got to compliment you. This presentation was very clear. There wasn't meandering or boogie-foogie. It was all understandable, and I really applaud you for getting the word out. We need to explain this with facts and data, not just boogie-foogie, and you've done it. This is very, very powerful. Thanks.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah.
The Indiana Citizen has actually run this series in two different articles. The Indiana Citizen, which is a publication that comes out once every week on Friday, done by a friend of ours, Phil Morrill. Thanks, Charlie. Other thoughts? Christians have to stop saying the Christian right is Christianity. It's not Christianity. This is Christianity. What happens here is Christianity. Look at these signs on the wall. I just love these signs on the wall. That's Christianity.
I do have to say, they have done a brilliant job of making many Americans believe they are Christianity.
They are. They have.
And I've told you, I think I've told the congregation several times, a local minister who's evangelical said to me, "You did it wrong. You went to seminary. I went and got a degree in marketing."
Right.
And it shows.
It shows. That does show.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Anybody want to talk?
And this Christian nation point that's being pushed completely, and every hair on the back of my neck stands up as a lawyer, but with everybody else, it seems to be having an impact.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yes. You one.
First.
Okay.
I was going to say that it's really, really hard to focus when somebody brings up some of the Christian right arguments or, push points like abortion, that kind of thing, to say, to turn that around and go to the 5 points that really we all need to care about, not silo the conversation into those negative.
I absolutely agree with that. I absolutely agree with that.
I don't know how to do it though. I mean, I can't control I try, but I have a hard time, and I think everybody does, controlling our reaction to, no, that's not right.
Well, that's the point. Because you want to say that's not correct, right? You want to say, I
Right.
want to win this. You could also say that's not really relevant to anybody, right? We ask these surveys, ask young people, do young people care about the abortion issue? They don't care. They don't care. The people that care are the people in this room. The young people don't care. They care
That is,
about,
aren't committed to prohibiting it.
they don't care. It's not important to them. How this issue comes out doesn't matter to them. Excuse me. They're worried about health care. They're worried about passing the environment on to their children. They're worried about income inequality. They're worried about all these issues that affect their lives. Not a single person I've talked to cares about abortion. They've got They just don't care about it.
So it's not on their radar?
It's not something that matters to them.
Women care about that.
Women care.
Women care about that.
Young women don't care about
They
it.
do care about it. Lack
So
of-
why? Have they solved the issue of getting pregnant?
Some of them have, most of them. I don't know. I'm just saying, you do a survey of young people. What issues matter to you? Right? You saw the list. You see abortion showing up on this list?
I think one of the things that has happened with the word healthcare, abortion is included in healthcare, in women's healthcare.
Yeah.
One of the things that has happened since abortion has been restricted so severely in so many states is that the other procedures and medical conditions surrounding abortion, they're not necessarily going to a clinic and getting a pregnancy terminated, but our pregnancies are being terminated every day for all kinds of different reasons. Those kinds of things have become, people have become more aware of them, and I think young people attach or connect abortion and abortion-related things with healthcare.
As opposed to a moral issue, it's a healthcare issue.
Correct.
Healthcare.
Well, if you look at what happened in Ireland and Poland, it suddenly became a very important issue based on particular things. In Ireland, it was, I think the woman was a dentist who died. And then it really changed the outlook, and I think the same thing happened in Poland. So sometimes, remember, surveys are always a point in time. And if there was something that had a high profile in the news, you know, I just read, they now have charged a woman in Alabama with murder for chemical-induced abortion. Sometimes those things can change very rapidly depending on what's in the news. I also want to agree, sometimes progressives get very caught up in a single issue.
They do.
And
it's not an issue that we won on. You can put "thou shalt not kill" on a bumper sticker, and Christians can argue about what that means, right? You can't argue about what the Bible says about the poor. You can't argue about what the Bible says about the environment. You can't argue about what the Bible says about income inequality. You can't argue about that. And we've tended to take on issues about which you can have arguments, and we've lost the arguments.
And we have to understand how well organized they are.
Right.
So there's churches,
And how well funded they are.
yes, there are churches who the minister checks to see who voted. And then they go after the people who didn't vote. They are incredibly well organized to get out their voters. And while we only need to peel off, what, 5%?
Or less.
Or less. And so sometimes it's not important to argue with the person who's hardcore. What we really need to do is seek out those people who have some availability to our
Young people.
Well, and the response I give to, I was approached in the library. I was running for office, and I was talking with them about putting up my business card and having a meeting, a town hall meeting there. And some guy just looked at me and he said, "You're a Democrat, you kill babies." Well, I had no response, but I do now. And that response is, no one likes abortion. It is not something you grow up and that's your goal, to have an abortion.
Right.
And it really does kind of shut people down and get away from that, push button issue. Then you can talk about healthcare, overall health, having
good idea,
the
right,
means to.
Okay, anything else? We gotta be out there, right?
Yeah.
Get the sanctuary?
Another 10 minutes.
There's a book that just recently came out by Catherine Stewart. Is it? Did I get the author right? Money, Lies, and Government. That really does a good job, and she has a chapter at the end about what you can do. It's a really good book.
Money, Lies, and Government.
Money,
Men, lies, and God.
Only commerce, lies, commerce.
Wait a second. You've got it on your,
I've got it on mine.
he'll get it right, I never can remember things exactly.
Okay, anything else?
I was just
Yeah.
gonna say, last night there was a vigil down at Christ Church Cathedral. Is that Phil's here? Mike, Phil?
No,
I think it's,
Oh, that's
yeah.
right. I'm sorry. At Christ Church Cathedral, with Peace Vigil, and they had a Latina pastor, lady Muslim who does work at the women's prison, two Episcopal priests, one was from Milwaukee, and a rabbi. It was kind of like a joke, you know, if all these people walked into a bar, what would happen? But every one of them spoke, and each one of these, all 5 of these things were touched by every single speaker.
Good.
And it really was wonderful because the threads all came together from all, you know, all these different faith bases.
So if I had my wish, if I could make a wish and it would happen, mainline churches, Quaker churches would be giving sermons about these 5 issues.
Yep.
We're not giving sermons about these issues. I made this presentation earlier at St. Luke's Methodist, and they said, yeah, we're a progressive church. We're not talking about these issues. They couldn't remember ever having a sermon on the environment in St. Luke's Methodist Church, ever on the environment.
That's terrible.
we're in the process of recording a person in our yearly meeting whose ministry is environmental justice. And that's all she talks about, that's all she focuses on. And so it's on our radar. But you're right. I listen to a lot of Quaker sermons across the country. And you'd think you were back in the 1800s dealing with, revivalism. The book is Money, Lies, and God, Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy by Catherine Stewart. Really good book.
Well, thanks again for letting me come and talk.
Thank you.